Thank you, everybody, for coming. This, as many of you know, is the first candidate formed a CD-01 in the state at the county level. They had one in Portsmouth last night, so all our candidates are well prepped and rehearsed and ready to go. So, in case some of you don't know me, my name is Walter King. I'm the chair of the Strafford County Democratic Committee, and my co-moderator is Steve Marchand, and you all know him. You don't need him to introduce, but he'll be my co-moderator, move the goalposts, and the politics in New Hampshire podcast. So we have a great program for you to do tonight, and I'm going to do the basic introductions, and then Steve will be able to handle the questions for the candidates. That covers a wide topic, number of topics. So I think you'll get a good flavor of where our candidates stand on those important topics. And I think that we're seeing something rather historic. At least I've not seen it. We've never seen this number of candidates running for congressional seats. So we have a tremendous number of candidates running. And it's a good thing because, as many of you know, all of you know, that the country is facing some really, really serious issues right now, and we need somebody strong to speak up for the people of New Hampshire. So, our group is given 3x5 cards. So if you hear something that tickles your mind, you want to write it down, please write it down and give it to some of our hosts. They'll be collecting them, and we'll try, if we have time, to incorporate them when Steve's asked the questions. So please write them down and hand them over. Some administrative stuff, the exits you will see, and the restrooms are out that door to the right and across from the gym, so they're on the right side when you walk out, maybe about 50 feet down. So when these questions start, they're gonna last till about a little before 8 o'clock. Then we'll have the candidates do their closing statements, and then at the end, around 8 o'clock, they're gonna come down and talk with you like they were doing earlier, and then Steve will talk a little bit about his special program that is gonna happen afterwards, and I hope all of you stick around and get to hear the kind of things that's gonna happen in that program. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to our co-moderator, Steve.
Let's do it. All right, thank you. Well, before you settle in, I believe we have a bag. Yes. In an effort to do this as fairly as possible, we've asked each of the candidates in their first role, preparing to be a congressperson, to put their name in the bag. We will pull one out, and that will be the equivalent of cutting the cards to determine where we start. We will go alphabetically for answers and rotate who gets it first, because there are times you want to be first to answer, and there are times you don't want to be last, and we're trying to even that all out. So, in what I hope is not the most dramatic part of the evening, but there we go. All right, Maura, you will be the first person to answer the first question. We'll rotate and so forth. So there you go. Okay, but actually, it won't be the first question. It'll be introductions. So we'll start with introductions, about a minute and a half each. We have, just to make sure we have the color-coded, there we are. So you'll keep an eye out for that for timing. If you go over the time significantly, I will politely but firmly ask you to finish the sentence you're on. But with that said, first, a round of applause for our 5 candidates here tonight. I do want to note before we get going, an additional candidate who was unable to be here this evening, Stephanie Shaheen, had a pair of conflicts in the same evening at previously committed Democratic committee meetings, one up in Guilford in the Lakes region, and one in Kensington also this evening. So I just want to note that at the outset. With that, let us begin with a minute and a half opening statements, and we'll begin with Maura Sullivan. And you need the microphone, okay, yes. Your choice, if you'd like to Maura set the tone for us.
Who's doing audio? Is it better now? Oh, okay.
Oh, I see.
It's all you, my dear.
But if you're standing, we'll go.
Well, do the one at a time. How's that? All right.
Well, good evening, everyone. Steve, thank you so much for moderating. Thanks to my other candidates for being here. And thank you, everybody, for coming. What an incredible turnout. I think this says so much about what's at stake for New Hampshire right now and for our country, that there are so many people who took the time to come 5 months before an election. So thank you. I'm Maura Sullivan. I am a working mom of 3. I live with my husband and our 3 young children on the seacoast, and I'm a proud Marine Corps Iraq War veteran, married to a Navy Reserve officer, and I was really proud to have been appointed by President Obama to serve as Assistant Secretary of the VA and later as a senior Pentagon official in the Obama administration. I'm running for Congress for 2 reasons. Number 1, I love our country, and I believe so much in its promise. I risked my life for it, and I look around right now, and the very values that I risked my life for, that people I served with gave their lives for, are totally, totally at risk. Second, I love our community. It's our home. And my husband and I are truly products of the American dream. I was a scholarship kid who waited tables and took out student loans to get ahead. My husband's a son of immigrants. And that American dream that we're a product of is totally slipping away for way too many kids in New Hampshire, and I want to make sure that everybody has the same shot that I did. Finally, I think we can all know because of last night, these are really serious times, and we need leaders grounded in courage, in service, and in experience to stand up and fight like hell for all of us. Thank you.
And now we go to Christian.
Hi, thank you everyone. My name is Christian Urrutia. I'm going to take a minute, yes, more than that, introduce myself and tell you why I'm in this race. I start these discussions off saying, I'm a first-generation American. I say that with a lot of pride. I'm just so incredibly proud of my immigrant mother that was a night shift nurse at Catholic Medical Center, my immigrant father that was a community organizer. I got a shot to go to law school, went off to practice international law and human rights, joined the National Guard, became a public defender for our soldiers. I still serve here in New Hampshire in that capacity, and I was an appointee of President Biden in the last administration of the Pentagon. And I think a lot about my story and my parents' story, and I ask myself one fundamental question. In Trump's America, would my parents get a fair shake if they were starting off? Would I? The answer is plainly no. And I want you to think about your own lives, the lives of your kids or your partners or your parents. At that decisive moment in their life when they needed community, in Trump's America, would they get a fair shake? And that feeling that a lot of us have, that something is deeply, deeply wrong, that's precisely why I'm in this race. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you for being here.
Now we'll go to Carliegh.
Hi,
Oh, yeah, really. Yeah.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Carliegh Beriont. It is really wonderful to see all of you here tonight. So thank you for coming out. I am from Hampton, New Hampshire. I am the mom of 2 awesome little kids. I am married to a very proud, wonderful public middle school teacher, and I'm a former union organizer. I helped found UAW Local 5118 in 2016. And since then, I have served as a teacher at Harvard and also the chair of the select board in Hampton, New Hampshire. Hampton is a really purple community. For those of you who don't know, we have 17,000 residents in the winter and 150,000 residents in the summer, which makes budgeting exciting. And one of the main reasons that I'm running for Congress is because of the really bad decisions that have been made in Washington, D.C. and in Concord, and how that is showing up in our classrooms and in our homes and in our communities. And when we see these cuts being made, the needs aren't going away, they're just being shifted onto us as taxpayers. So for the last 10 months, I have driven in my car 17,000 miles around the district, asking people what they wish that politicians understood better about their experiences, because I believe that politics is about listening. It's about organizing, it's about building power, and it's about enacting change. And tonight I'm here to listen to you and to your questions and to propose my vision for how we get out of the situation that we're in and we make life more affordable for the people living in New Hampshire. Thank you.
All right.
No, I'm gonna have to stand back here the whole
We'll
time.
work on this in the meantime.
That's all right, that's all right. We're all in this together and we troubleshoot together. All right, tell me when to go. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Chadzynski, Sarah C for 603. My website is sarahc603.com and I hope you'll take a look at it and learn more about me later tonight. I'm a mom of 3. I'm a state certified teacher with a master's in education and background in nonprofit leadership. I'm also the proud wife of a local firefighter and timber framer. And I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like as a single mother and teacher to go in and apply for food stamps to feed my kid. I know what it's like to have a child that has pre-existing medical conditions. My eldest is a brain tumor survivor. I also know what it's like to roll my sleeves up and jump in and get the work done, not because I'm appointed, not because I was paid, but pro bono, completely volunteer, to advocate for vulnerable people in Ukraine who are being pummeled by a tyrant. I have spent years now building a network across this country and down in DC to actually get work done when nothing is business as usual. And that is literally the only reason I'm running, to be of service to you in one of our greatest moments of need in our lifetime. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, and Heath.
Thank you so much for all of you being here tonight. It is so terrific to be back in my home community. You know, as your local state representative, it has been a true privilege to serve all of you in Concord. But my experience in Concord is partially why I'm running for U.S. Congress. See, I got involved in politics after I suffered a severe back injury when I was 15. I had an L4 burst fracture, I had 4 titanium rods put in, I had 4 8 screws put in, and they had to rebundle my spinal cord. I'm very thankful that I wasn't paralyzed, but that experience showed me just how broken our healthcare system really is. In 2020, I had one of those rods break. I had to have everything taken out, and I went through that experience all over again. See, this is exactly why we need Medicare for all. It's why I'm running for this race, because we need leadership that will fight for every single person's access. We need to make sure that we fight for universal education, so that we have tuition-free public trade schools and tuition-free public universities. We need to fight to ban private equity firms and large corporations from entering the single-family housing market. And we also need to make sure that we raise the minimum wage to a livable wage, because that is what we need to do if we are going to make this country a livable place again. Because we are seeing too much wealth end up in the hands of the 1%. And we need to figure out a way to rebalance it. And those issues and those proposals that I just talked about is how I plan on doing that. Thank you.
So those are questions. Each question will be about a minute and a half time to respond. This one will start with Christian, and then we'll go to Carliegh second, and we'll keep rotating throughout. The number of questions we get will depend on how good you guys are at sticking to a minute and a half each, frankly. But the first one is obviously no laughing matter. Emerson College released a poll about New Hampshire voters this week that said the same thing. CNN Sound polls and UNH polls, and every poll has said affordability and inflation remain the dominant issue to a plurality of voters in the country. They're very angry at Donald Trump and Republicans. In 2024, they were very angry at Joe Biden and Democrats. So it is not assuaged yet. So the question in that political context, the American dream is becoming a more exclusive club. Rising costs, you guys all know it, housing, childcare, education, healthcare. What can you do in this environment where voters are kind of angry at everybody and looking for quick relief on inflation? What can you do in Congress to address this concern that the American dream just isn't terribly available for voters and seems to be getting harder and harder rather than more and more attainable?
Thank you, Steve. So when we talk about affordability, we've got to break it down into its parts. If you're a young couple that's just had a kid, it's going to be childcare. We need universal childcare in this country. We are the richest country in the world. Of course we can pay for it. And don't let anyone ever convince you we can't. And one of the ways to do that is to actually tax the billionaires in this country. We can have universal health care too. So if you're sick, you're certainly going to be thinking about affordability. How am I going to be able to take care of myself? And I think anyone that's seen someone they love get really sick, or they've gotten really sick themselves, knows that's the question you ask yourself. Can we actually afford this? And if you're trying to buy a home, and you go out to the market, and you can't find any homes to even buy, because we need to build more homes, because Washington has failed to have vision. We need an actual vision to build 5 to 6 million homes, not in 20 years, not in 15 years, but in less than 5. And as a country, we can do that. And I've laid out a plan how to do that on my website, on urrutia4nh.com. We need to have a national infrastructure bank. What we need, though, the key thing, vision. Vision to be bold again. We don't have to live like this. We can actually afford these things. Thank you very much.
I appreciate this question. It's a really hard one, and it's one that actually probably everyone here in the audience has some of the answers to. So for example, in the last few weeks, we've seen the price of gas go up, right? Why did the price of gas go up? Because our president started a war in Iran, right? If that war were to stop, right, that would help stabilize markets and it would help the cost of things like gas go down. So there are a lot of choices that are being made by our federal government right now that are in the short term causing a lot of harm for people who are barely hanging on. Like, I see this every single day in Hampton when I talk to people who come into our town welfare office, when I see people who are literally struggling to afford to pay their property taxes because they just keep going up in the state. When it comes to affordability, there are so many things that our federal government could do, and the two that I would prioritize are fully funding IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is an amazing piece of legislation that was passed in the 1970s when our government agreed and said every single kid in this country deserves a free and appropriate public education, and then they didn't pay for it. Our federal government is supposed to be paying 40% of those costs for special education, and last year they paid 12. That means that you all of us, paid the rest of it. Things like that, things like promoting Medicare for all so that our health care is provided for, right? So that our municipal budgets go down. Those are the kinds of things that would give us all a little more spending room when we go to the store, and it wouldn't make it so hard for us to make ends meet. So if you take a look at my prompt card in the back of the room, you'll see a few key points on there. Number one is universal health care. So while we have immediate needs and issues that are happening right now that impact right now, we need to think long-term as well. And healthcare is a major cost right here, right in this building. The number one expense for schools and our school districts is healthcare for their teachers, of which I am one, of the staff, etc., and that falls onto us as taxpayers. So that's number one. We need to address that and move in a direction of universal health care. Number two is we need to address the housing issue, which is a major issue here on the ground in New Hampshire. My husband's a builder. We're very acutely aware of how this impacts people on a day-to-day. Number three, we need to sign on to Representative Khanna and Bernie Sanders' billionaire's tax. And I was really inspired by this because Representative Khanna actually represents the wealthiest district in our nation. He is seated in an incredible position to actually enable this tax bill, which will help ease the burden and fund important programs across the country. The last thing that I want to mention that's incredibly important is pausing the interest rate on student loans. While it's contentious to eliminate them, we can get bipartisan support to pause the 12.9% interest rate. And yes, as a working mother, I would please like us to have child care for working families. Thank you.
So I want to address something that Steve said, talking about the difference between Biden and Trump. And we have to really understand why we lost the 2024 election. Because we didn't lose to Trump, we didn't lose to the Republicans, we lost to the couch. And the thing is that Democrats did not motivate voters to come out. We didn't really provide them real policy plans or a real vision as to how to move this country forward. And that's where we need to be very clear about the policy positions that we need to be taking. We need to be talking about universal health care, because it is one of the biggest costs that people are facing today. We need to be talking about housing, because, in the House, in the State House, we talk a ton about building homes, but we never, ever, ever talk about who's buying them. And that's where we need to make sure that we are able to put a moratorium on large corporations, on private equity firms, to prevent them from being able to purchase up these homes. Because housing right now is the biggest issue in our state, and young people are leaving. We just passed Maine as the oldest state in the country. And we have the highest in-state tuition anywhere in the nation for in-state universities. Young families are not necessarily looking at New Hampshire as a place to move, because it's not necessarily seen as a stable state. And when you have state revenues changing as drastically as they are, we need to make sure that we have a sustainable tax structure that makes sure that we are able to pay our bills. Thank you.
A number of great ideas that have been mentioned by my colleagues. I very much agree with IDAA, taxing the billionaires. Let's start with just the fundamental issue here, which is the vast income inequality and the rising income inequality gap in our country. In my lifetime alone, CEO pay has gone up 1,428%. Average worker pay has gone up 18%. It doesn't take an economist or an MBA to realize that math just doesn't work. There are two sets of rules right now in Donald Trump's America. There is a set of rules for the top 2%, the Epstein class, and there's a set of rules for the rest of us. And I'm going to fight for the rest of us. Now, I only have a minute, so I'm going to try to talk really fast because there's a lot of things we got to do. First thing I would introduce is Medicare for all who want it. It's going to do a lot of great things. The first two primarily are it lowers significantly out-of-pocket costs for seniors, for families, for small business owners in our state who are struggling, and greatly reduces the cost of prescription drugs. Second, affordable housing. I plan on sitting on the committee that oversees affordable housing committee or policy for the country, because it is on the forefront of issues that everyone in our district is struggling with. Third, we got to expand access to education, and I think that means expanding optional national service, expanding things like AmeriCorps, so that kids can earn money to go to college. And fourth, childcare. Literally, people in New Hampshire can't afford to go to work. It's insane. It's literally nuts. And so we need tax credits for childcare. Thank you.
Carliegh will be first. Respond to this one, and it rhymes with the first question, and it's more specifically about housing. You all, in your own ways, kind of touched on it already, but in even more specific polling on this, including the UNH poll, housing is the component of affordability that is the #1 issue right now. So there's been some action, some green shoots of hope in the Senate, a 21st Century Road to Housing Act that has seen some bipartisan action, uncertain future in a House that doesn't seem to enjoy bipartisanship too much. What can we do? What would you do as a member of Congress, get into the weeds a little bit as it relates to dealing with the housing issue?
Oh, an invitation to get into the weeds, my favorite place. So you're totally right about this, and I think that everyone here can appreciate just how ridiculous the housing situation is in New Hampshire. right? In part, it's a supply and demand program. In part, it's the fact that the houses that we have are just out of reach for way too many people. Like, I hear all the time from families who don't start having kids because they're not sure they can afford to send their kids to daycare and also pay for their mortgage or their rent. Or I hear about college students who are not sure if they're gonna stay in New Hampshire after they graduate because they can't afford to live here on a lot of the starting salaries that they're being offered, right? I hear from older people who don't know if they can afford to age in place. And one of the things that I think is so exciting, beyond the fact that, yes, in the past couple of weeks, we've had a lot of really bad news in Washington, but one really exciting glimmer of hope is this bipartisan legislation that was passed in the Senate. It shows that we are capable of having a functioning government, potentially if we can get some better leadership in the House. But what I would do is actually focus on what's underneath the roads. So municipal water and sewer infrastructure is something that our federal government can incentivize, and it's one of the things that would absolutely encourage more affordable housing and housing construction in places like New Hampshire. There are a lot of other options that I think we have, such as encouraging small builders and loans for people who are not part of large conglomerate construction companies, but I do think that prioritizing and incentivizing municipal water and sewer across the board would make the biggest difference here in New Hampshire. Ready? Working on the time. All right. So one of the things that hits home for me on this, I was chatting with my father about this recently, and he was reflecting on the fact that when they bought their first house, it cost about $53,000. And that was about a year's salary of him and my mom. Can anyone here buy a house right now in the market with your annual salary? Probably not many. I know I can't. So this is a compounding issue. And at the federal level, we need to look at loopholes that are allowing private equity firms to buy up housing and drive costs up across the nation. That's one loophole that we can close very quickly. The Private Equity Act was meant for people like you and me to invest our retirement funds into a physical entity versus into the stock market. That's what the spirit of that legislation is for. So we need to immediately do that. We need to incentivize and promote building that allows for ADUs and variable expansion and contraction of homes. As the wife of a timber framer, that's something that is primary in the building that they do to allow for expansion and contraction of living space. We need to incentivize and provide tax credits for first-time home buyers to get into homes at a low rate, at a supportive rate, to be able to stay here in the community. And we need to help our seniors who are getting priced out of their homes be able to stay here in New Hampshire with us. Thank you.
So I know that I can assume pretty much everybody in this room doesn't like President Trump. And I think that we can all agree that a broken clock is right twice a day. The thing is that during President Trump's State of the Union, he talked about exactly one of the things that I've spoken about up on the stage. He wants to ban large corporations from being able to enter the single-family housing market. And I'm excited to work with him on that. I think that, for the most part, he's out for lunch, but on that one, he's got it spot on. And we need to figure out how we can work across the aisle on any issue. See, and this is what I've done in the New Hampshire State Legislature. I had 28 of my bills passed in our chamber last year. I had 9 signed by the governor. I was the second most active Democratic rep in the House, and I was the second most effective. We need to figure out how we can pass legislation and get it across the finish line. Things that will actually improve the real material conditions of every single person in this country. Because housing in this state, part of it is because we have so few units available because they are being turned into Airbnbs and short-term rentals rather than being turned into long-term use. And that increases our rents because it's decreasing our supply, while at the same time also lowering our vacancy rate. So that's why we need to ban them. We need to make sure that single-family housing is for, as the name implies, single families.
As Steve mentioned, housing and affordable housing is a crisis all across our district. We were up recently on a small business tour in North Conway and just hearing about the crisis of workforce housing. There are so many homes that people are using as second homes for Airbnb that folks can't afford to live there and operate our ski lifts and work in our tourist industry, particularly at our lovely minimum wage of $7.25, which is another topic we should get to tonight because that needs to be raised. It just doesn't work. As I said, I plan on sitting on the committee in Congress that oversees affordable housing policy for the country, and because I believe it's a crisis not only here, but across the board, it's something I want to work on. A few key ideas that I think we need to do right away are, and some of them have been mentioned here, are stop private equity firms and big corporations from buying single-family units. They're just pricing people out of homes, number one. Number two, expand programs like the VA home loan program for other first-time buyers so that people can afford to actually buy a home. And third is incentivize corporate developers so that they actually build affordable housing, because right now they're not building it because they don't make any money on it. And so the government can do something about that. Those are three concrete steps I believe we need to take. And what I'm going to do as our member of Congress is work with the local leaders, some of whom are here tonight, because our local leaders know what is the best solution for the Seacoast versus Manchester versus the Lakes region versus the mountains. Thank you.
When we think about housing, there's no one single problem. There's a lot of problems that are compounding upon each other. Some of it is private equity, buying single-family homes, and of course we should not allow that. But the biggest problem we have is we just don't have enough homes in America, and we don't have the type of homes we're not building that first-time buyers would buy. I'll give you a statistic, right? I was born in 1984. I'll let you all do the math as to how old I am. And when I was born, 30% of new builds were starter homes. Do you know what that number is today? 6 to 7%. So you don't have enough homes, and you don't build enough starter homes. And you know the reason why we're in this mess to begin with? Is because Washington and government haven't worked for a vision for how do we make sure this core thing that everyone needs in this country is available. I talked earlier about a national infrastructure bank, and I believe in it so much because we do need a national vision for building more homes. Incentivize local builders to build starter homes. Give them competitive financing so that they don't feel like they need to build McMansions to actually turn a profit, and work with local communities to invest in sewers, to invest in the infrastructure, and to incentivize more density where appropriate. That's how you actually solve this problem.
So next one, we're going to pivot to an issue that President Trump promised in 2024 he would pump the brakes on: foreign entanglements. We are very entangled, it turns out, since then, and so it's a complicated question. The one part that I got here from a member of the county committee dealt with specifically Israel, the funding of weaponry to Israel as part of the conflict in Gaza. Of course, we also have Iran, which is top of mind as well. So I'm going to ask her to focus on the Israel part of the question, the conflict there, and if you have all the time in the world to deal with another global level conflict in your minute and a half, feel free to do so. But specifically, let's focus on Israel. Where do you see us going with that, and what can you do as a member of Congress to let the voice be heard? I think a lot of folks, certainly in the Democratic Party, have a serious concern about the continued funding and support of Israel in what they are doing in that conflict. How do you feel about that position, and what would you do as a member of Congress about it?
So this feels like a perfect question for me to start with, because yesterday my family in Israel were in bunkers, and they have not felt safe in Israel since Netanyahu came into power. I'm the only Jewish candidate. That's not a hit on anybody. I'm the only Jewish candidate up here. If I was taking funds from AIPAC, my campaign would be fully funded. What we have right now is a situation where extremist leaders are at the helm and the people fall into the literal crossfire. My grandmother's a Holocaust survivor. We know the impact of war. When we say never again, as a Jewish candidate, I mean never again, and not in my name. In my time as the senior executive coordinator for an organization called Med Global, it's an international medical aid organization, I oversaw their annual conference and gala. We raised over $800,000 under my watch to fund medical aid into the hospitals in Gaza. I supported medical teams going into Gaza and taking care of the people on the ground. I understand the nuance of the dynamics here, and I have the ability and a uniquely positioned perspective as a Jewish candidate who has helped the people of Gaza to help resolve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We need to be very clear about what's happening in Palestine, because it is a genocide. And there are no ands, ifs, ors, buts about it. It is happening, and it is happening with our dime. We're the ones paying for it. And we need to put an end to that. I think that we need to make sure that we are talking about making sure that any sort of aid that we're providing to any of our allies is conditioned, because we shouldn't be funding war crimes. That is not something that this country stands for, and I won't fund it. I will not vote for it. I'm proud to say that I have the support and endorsement of Citizens Against AIPAC Corruption. I'm not taking any money from the pro-Israel lobby, and I think that we need to be very clear that when we're looking at these foreign entanglements, that we need to make sure that we are not funding ourselves as candidates by entities that would benefit from a foreign conflict. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate this question and the opportunity to talk about it. And I think, Steve, your point about current events, like this is so critical that we address it. As a former Marine Corps officer who was in Fallujah in 2005, Iraq War veteran, and as a former senior Pentagon official who spent days, if not weeks, meeting with world leaders and military leaders throughout the Middle East when I worked for the Secretary of Defense and President Obama. I have a lot of thoughts on this and I have a lot of experience on it. Before any of that, I think as a mother, frankly as a human, I don't know how anyone would look at the images that we saw in Gaza and on October 7th and not just be absolutely disgusted and horrified. It is some of the worst murder, starvation, sexual assault that has happened in the history of our planet. And I think we would all agree that we can never, ever, ever let that happen again. I think the only realistic path forward for a lasting peace in the region is going to be a two-state solution where the Palestinian people can live freely, securely, and not governed by Hamas, and the Israeli people can live freely and securely without the threat of Hamas and governed by whomever they choose. That's their choice. And that's what I would be focused on in our conference. Thank you.
I want to acknowledge this is a tough issue to talk about for a lot of Americans. Our dialogue around this has become really challenging as a country. But I'm going to tell you exactly what my views are. I spent significant parts of my life devoted to human rights and international law. We can say that what happened on October 7th was heinous. We can say that, and we can also say what we see happening in Gaza are not only gross abuses of human rights, but there's ample evidence to sustain that a genocide has been committed in Gaza. And you can also say, of course, we should always condition all of our sales of weapons to any country for it to be consistent with our values as a country. I'll tell you this, look, I serve in the military, I was in the Pentagon. If the United States was conducting itself the way Netanyahu in Israel has conducted itself in Gaza, I would be up in arms. And I know there's a lot of other service members out there that feel the same way I do. The United States needs to bring greater balance to our relationship with Israel, and I think a fundamental part of that is supporting bills like Senator Sanders' bills to limit and stop the flow of certain weapons to Israel. So, thank you.
It's only resolving all problems with this easy. So I agree with pretty much everything that Christian Urrutia said before me. I would not support offensive arms being given to Israel. I am literally horrified by all of the entanglements that the United States has gotten involved in. The fact that we went into Venezuela and deposed a sitting leader. The fact that we have gone into Iran and struck them not just once but twice this year, neither of which was authorized by the American people or our representatives in Congress. I think it's incredibly important that Congress take back its authority to declare war. I think it is so important, not just for the people around this world who are suffering right now because of choices that people in our government are making, but it is the right thing to do for the people who come up after us. I am somebody who is 37 years old. I grew up, and one of my first memories is of September 11th. And this country has been at war for most of my entire adult life, and it is horrifying that this is what we are doing with our time and our resources, instead of taking better care of the people in this country and the people around the world. When it comes to this, I just want you to know that in Washington, D.C., I will strongly stand against any type of war, any type of foreign entanglement, and I will be always on the side of fighting for peace, not just abroad, but at home, because peace at home and peace abroad is what makes us all safer.
On this, and the question, not unrelated to the last one, deals with environmental and energy policy. Seems to be part of what gets us entangled quite a bit. Last summer's one big, beautiful bill, act's passage, had real impacts on clean energy policy. Significantly revised U.S. clean energy incentives targeting wind, solar, and electric vehicle subsidies. Now with what's going on in Iran, it's reshaping energy security strategies. What will you do? And of course, the Iran dynamic situation, but hanging over us as we speak. What will you do to fight for clean energy, help our environment, including fisheries, adapt to the changes that are already occurring, and how do we become not just more energy efficient, but resilient in the face of climate change that has already begun and is not going to stop anytime soon?
Thank you for the question. So there are really two parts to this answer. First part is how we make our grid more efficient, and the second part is the types of energy that we use. So when we're talking about how we make our grid more efficient, we need to be talking about the buildings that we're in, because a lot of those are where most of our energy is going for us on a day-to-day basis. But even more important than that is the energy that large corporations are using and how that is being handled. Because so often we are seeing large corporations use up tons and tons and tons of energy that is not necessarily being used efficiently. And that's where we need to put certain benchmarks into different industries so that we can make sure that we're reaching standards. We also need to look at where our energy is coming from, and we need to diversify, because New Hampshire doesn't have any fossil fuels. They don't actually exist here, so I don't know how Republicans plan on making us energy independent. You hear that all the time in the State House, that we're going to become energy independent. Still haven't seen that, because we need to make sure that we are able to produce not just wind, solar. We need to be thinking about the opportunities with tidal energy. I mean, in the Gulf of Maine, we have such large opportunities that we could be studying that. We need to be thinking about other opportunities in transitioning from fossil fuels to nuclear to really true, fully clean energy sources, and making sure that we have a path forward there. Thank you.
This is an incredibly timely question, and I think we all know climate change isn't something that's coming, it's here now. We were talking about this when we were gathered last night in Portsmouth. The flooding in Prescott Park, the erosion of our beaches here on the seacoast, the risk to our Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, to our seacoast job market and housing market. This is real and it's present and it's not going anywhere. So we've got to figure out what we do to make ourselves more resilient. I think that comes down to 3 different levels. There's individual actions, corporations, and our government. And I'll start at the top. Individuals. We have to roll back what Trump did, and let me be very clear, the Biden administration did not go nearly far enough. If you want people to do the right thing vis-a-vis clean energy, you have to make it economically advantageous for them to do so. Because a lot of people are trying to put food on the table. So if you want to apply tax credits, you better incentivize the heck out of it and make it economically advantageous. Second, corporations, polluters need to pay. This isn't complicated. You pollute, you gotta pay for it, okay? The government needs to mandate that. Third, when it comes to our country, this is actually a great opportunity. It's a huge step, but it's a great opportunity. I propose an expansion of optional national service, which includes a climate corps. So people can earn money for college if they're committed to going into clean energy jobs. Creates jobs right here in New Hampshire, creates jobs around the country, restores a sense of service to our country, and brings about the clean energy future that we all need.
So look, we gotta look at May of 2025 and what this administration did in the big beautiful bill that made it that much harder to have green energy and renewable energy projects in this country. And we are at a fork in the road. Do we go down the path of more fossil fuels? Do we go down the path of more renewable energy? The world is going to need more energy, and certainly the United States is in the future. It just is. It's the reality. We need to be actually investing in green energy sources in America. Not only because it's good for the environment, not only because it's good for our health, it's also good for our national security too. And do you know who's actually figured that out? The Chinese. They understand that you need solar and battery technology. They're the world leaders in it. Look, we are a country that can do incredible things. I actually still believe in this country. We can be a country that is energy independent. We can be a country that our water is not polluted because we need a coal power plant to power our day-to-day life. We just have to have the vision to fight for it. And if I go to Washington, that's exactly the vision I'm going to fight for. Because it's good for all of you, it'll make your life cheaper, and it'll actually make our country much more secure.
The questions of energy and the environment are so important right now. How many people saw their electricity bill go up last year? Impressive. Those of you who didn't, I would love to chat after and hear your secrets. The cost of energy has been going up. New Hampshire has some of the highest energy costs anywhere in the country, and this is a huge problem for us. There's so much that we can do in this regard, but one of the things that I think we need to think about is, well, first, where is the money coming from to help modernize our grid, and why is it so inconsistent? So this past year in Hampton, we finally convinced the select board, yay, to pass this policy to say that we wanted solar panels on our capped landfill. And it took us a really long time to convince people in town that we should have this. And the reason that we were able to convince people is because we had federal funding from the Inflation Reduction Act to make this economically viable. But guess what? That federal funding disappeared at the end of 2025. And so has a lot of the other federal funding that has insulated us from the really bad environmental choices that our representatives in Concord have made over the past few years, and also what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. with the pulling back of all of these incentives for green energy. So yeah, we absolutely need to put those back. There needs to be some consistency, but when it comes to energy, one of the big reasons why energy is so expensive is because we have people making our laws who are being bought and paid for by energy corporations. And the amount of corruption and the revolving door between lobbyists and people who are legislators needs to be closed. And that is one of the best ways that we can make energy more affordable. So I know that we've talked about how energy expenses have gone up. And one of the things that I know is that Funding from the federal government that was stopped impacted our unions and our workers. And it stopped green energy production that we here in New Hampshire are connected to. So we need to reverse that immediately. Just like pausing interest rates on student loans is an investment in our future, taking federal funds and investing it in secure energy here in New Hampshire is an investment in our future, is an investment in my kids' future, is an investment in your grandkids' future. So that's incredibly important. It's part of why I like to sit on the Appropriations Committee, which brings funding back home, and why I like to put legislation in place that supports this development right here at home and supports union jobs here at home, because that's also something that we need. When we're looking at climate change, I mentioned this last night in Portsmouth, we actually participated in a UNH study on our farm where we have a maple grove, and we watched the change that they are documenting in maple production because of climate change. It is here, and it is impacting us at home. So thank you.
Very good. There we go. Camaraderie within the room. I had to look at my notes too. We're going to move on to another topic. Serious. I feel like this could easily be a 3-hour event. Unfortunately, immigration. So there's the values part, and there's the practical political part that I want to see if we can get at a little bit of these answers. On the values part, it's a human rights issue. Can we treat our citizens and our non-citizens, can we treat people with dignity and respect? How do we get back to a place where we can do that? How will you do that as a member of Congress? The political part, and polling's pretty clear on this. The American people overwhelmingly oppose the way that President Trump and the administration have used ICE in an extremely aggressive manner. However, looking at the numbers, the American people are generally supportive of President Trump's effectiveness at restricting illegal border crossings, particularly the southern border. It's a nuanced look in the polls. The Americans definitely don't like one of them, but they generally remain supportive of the other element of it. So how do you, as Democratic candidates running for federal office in this environment, how do you thread that needle to communicate this two-sided approach that a lot of voters look at for this, and making sure that democratic values are at the center of all those answers?
I appreciate very much this question, and I think this is personal to all of us. How can it not be? We are, after all, a country of immigrants. The values that I risked my life for, that people gave their lives for, was the idea of what this country is supposed to be about. That my mother-in-law and father-in-law could come here with next to nothing and work hard and get good jobs and send their kids to good public schools, and their kids could then go and live the American dream. And we have a president who fundamentally doesn't believe in that. And as a veteran, I find it heartbreaking, because it's the very idea, the fundamental idea that I risked my life to defend. Now, let's talk about the political part. This idea, first of all, the president is absolutely has lost his mind with regard to ICE. He murdered American citizens on the streets of Minneapolis, including a government employee. That was murder. It is not okay, and we need to call it out and absolutely not fund another dime until he decides and puts some policies in place that are completely different from what we have right now. We also, this idea that we can't have good immigration policies is a false choice. We had comprehensive immigration reform. This president tore it up. So I'm going to work across the aisle with other veterans to get immigration reform that works in a manner that it is in constitution and in concert with our American values.
When I think about immigration, of course I have to think of my own story, my parents' story. First my family born here, as I mentioned at the top. And I think about the beauty and the challenges of being in first-generation family. This administration has given all of you this false choice, this notion that the law and security means you need to have masked thugs going through your communities, pulling people out of their homes and killing them too, and that is just false. So this is what I think we need to do with ICE, dismantle it. We need to get rid of ICE. I have no problem saying that. We need to replace it. And Christy Nome, you're not off the hook. Christy Nome and the ICE agents that have committed gross and systematic violations of the Constitution and of the law need to be held to account. But I'll tell you this, and I say this as someone that, to me, this is the core of the American dream. The idea that you come to this country and get a fair shake. That also means we need an orderly immigration process. That also means we need a pathway for folks that have been here and have otherwise been abiding by the rules and the laws to actually come out of the shadows. It also means that we need a secure border. We don't need to be given the false choices. We can have all these things. We can have human rights. We can have things that are constitutional, that are consistent with the Constitution, and also have a secure border. So thank you.
Well, on immigration, there is so much to say in so little time. Steve, I feel like your question took 1 minute and 30 seconds to ask, so I feel like we should get more than 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer, but I will do my very best. And also, I will refer you to my website, carlieghberiont.com, where I have a very long paper on what we do after we abolish ICE, because I do think that that's the direction we need to be going in as a country right now. But what I will say are a few things. So number one, I think this is an issue that so many people in New Hampshire agree on, regardless of what side of the political aisle they stand on. And I say this for 2 reasons. One, because in Rockingham County, where we have 3 county commissioners, 2 of whom are Republicans, we showed up at those Rockingham County commissioner meetings for weeks, and we testified when they were considering whether or not to house ICE detainees in our county jail, and we got them to say no to that contract. We got them to say no to that contract. I know that things in Strafford, and I know there are so many of you here who have worked so hard on protesting the ICE detainees in the Strafford County Jail, and I really, really appreciate all of the work that you are doing, because that makes a difference, right? The people who showed up in Merrimack, that makes a difference. In Hampton, we had 5 members of the select board vote unanimously to say we do not want ICE in our town. That vote was initially 2-2, and I got the members to publicly change their votes, because the American people do not agree with the way that immigration is being conducted in this country right now. What I will also say is that legal immigration has completely stopped, and we need to make sure that all of the people who are waiting to reunite with their families and come to their jobs have the opportunity to do so. So comprehensive immigration reform, check it out on my website. So we had immigration reform on the table just before the last election. Anyone know why it got pulled off? Anyone know why Speaker Johnson wouldn't put it on the floor for a vote? Thank you. Because somebody wanted to use it as a key component for their election campaign. We need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Our country is built on immigrants like my family, like my grandmother, who was stateless and a naturalized citizen, a 97-year-old Holocaust survivor. So when this administration talks about taking away naturalized citizenship, that's my 97-year-old grandmother. That's my father-in-law, who grew up under communist rule in Poland and is an incredible contributor to our society here. My campaign announced in front of the Strafford County Corrections Center, in front of the barbed wire fence, because our campaign begins where human rights are being compromised. And I am not okay with this, and I will not stand down. We need to abolish ICE. I have said this publicly multiple times, but that is not enough. I walked in and talked to my grandmother when Minneapolis was happening, and she looked at me and said, "Sarah, I've had enough of the stop them." I said, "Okay, that's it." And I've been in touch with our federal delegation and multiple other people on the Hill to work to pass legislation now, not waiting until I get elected, to outlaw Gestapo-style tactics so that even if we abolish or dismantle ICE, it is not put onto another federal entity. Thank you.
We need to abolish ICE. We need to prosecute the agents who have committed crimes against our fellow countrymen who have violated our Constitution, because we need the Constitution be treated as the law of the land. And ICE is clearly not treating it that way. We also need to look at what's happened here in the Strafford County, because I'm very proud of the work that my fellow state representative colleagues and myself were able to do, because we not only blocked a budget from being passed at the county level, but we also passed a resolution calling for the renegotiation of our contract with ICE. And I think that that's very important, because at the end of the day, when we're pulling people with no criminal history into our prisons and jails, that is wrong, because they are the only thing that they've done wrong is not have the proper paperwork. And we need to make sure that we provide them the opportunity to get that paperwork. Since we've changed from INS to DHS handling immigration services, we've seen a huge shift in how immigration has been handled. And this is something that I think is very important, because when INS was handling things, it was done through the Department of Justice, not through the administration. And that's what DHS is doing. It's through the executive branch. So instead of treating things as though it's a case where you might have judicial options, we need to make it very clear. Thank you.
On healthcare, it seems like it's being assaulted in all directions. Onerous requirements of Medicaid, you see that at the state level, shrinking offers, Medicare Advantage, ACA, skyrocketing premiums. Many of you are feeling it. Anybody in local government is feeling that in budgets for particular schools right now. So for folks trying to understand the difference between you on the issue of how you're going to deal with this seminal issue, I'll start with Christian. We'll go around. Talk about healthcare and how you see the path forward given all these barriers we're looking at right now.
Thank you, Steve. So let's take stock of where we are right now. We spend twice per capita on healthcare than any other country in the world. We're the richest country in the world. But for some reason, you all have to pay 3 to 4 times more for your medicine than Canadians and Europeans. Why? Because corporate PACs and the pharma lobby and the insurance lobby control your outcomes. I have ultimately a 3-word response for what we need to do. Medicare for all. And if I go to Washington, I'm going to fight for that. It is the clearest and the best system for actually solving our healthcare crisis in this country, because we are in a crisis. It is clear. 100 million Americans with medical debt of some kind. It's immoral. It's also economically, it isn't even smart. A Medicare for All system across the nation is actually cheaper than our current healthcare system as it stands right now. And don't ever let anyone tell you that we just possibly can't afford this. It's just too expensive. And then you see a line of it, it's like, but $200 billion are going to go to the Iran war. Maybe let's raise the military budget to $1.5 trillion. Of course we can afford it. And you know one of the ways we do that? We actually tax the billionaire class in this country. You all deserve healthcare. You deserve predictability. The American people deserve a lot better than what they've been getting.
So I'm actually really optimistic about healthcare. I'm someone who also supports Medicare for All because I literally hate having to spend 1,000 hours on the phone with my insurance company asking why they're not covering my kid's strep test that I know is covered, or going back and forth between the doctor's office and the pharmacy, figuring out why does this thing require prior authorization? Who's going to do that? I know doctors hate it. I know pharmacists hate it. I know we hate it. And these are all things that our government can fix, and they should absolutely do that. And that's the thing that I will be advocating for in Washington, D.C. So in addition to Medicare for All, which again is something that in 2016 in New Hampshire there was some support for, we heard Bernie Sanders campaigning for president on it. In 2020 we heard a lot more support for Medicare for All, but there was always that question, how are you going to pay for it? Or maybe other people don't want this. Some people like their employer-based insurance. And then the pandemic happened, and we realized that healthcare is a human right. It should not be tethered to your job. You should have access to healthcare from the day you are born until the day you die. And that healthcare should include things like vision and dental. Okay, so when it comes to things like Medicare Advantage or Medicare Advantage New Hampshire, right, we have seen big corporations pulling out and leaving people scrambling to find health care, right? We have seen school cares and all of these corporations that help us provide employee health care for our municipal employees disappearing and leaving us with the bills. These are higher tax bills for us, and there is a way out of this, and it requires us supporting Medicare for all. For anyone who says, you can't get that passed, why are you fighting for that? That's exactly why I'm going to Congress. You do not get what you do not fight for, and I'm fighting for our health care. So this year, our family of 5 found a health care bill, a health insurance bill of $2,600 a month. That's over $30,000 a year, and that doesn't include the deductible. For a family of 5 with 3 kids, that brings us up to about $50,000 a year on a working class income. No one should have to choose between feeding their kids and getting a cancer screening. No one should have to choose between keeping the electric on and getting medication that saves their life. So we need to take important steps towards universal health care, towards getting the ACA tax credits put in place, but they're a Band-Aid. We need to call them what they are. And then we need to get actual health care reform in place so that everybody has access to health care. As all of my colleagues have said, this is not complicated. This is something that we can and should do, and that is a basic human right. My mother went back to school after I was born because I was an unnecessary C-section, and she was livid. She went on to become a family practice doc, had 2 more kids. I watched her graduate medical school at 14. I watched her build her own practice to serve a community that was underserved. I worked summers in her office, and you know what I found? I found health insurance companies telling my mom, who I watched work her tail off to get her degree, how to care for her patients. I've made a pledge not to take any funds from corporate healthcare PACs or farmer folks. Thank you.
This is why I'm in this race. We need Medicare for all. I mean, I know too many people who have gone bankrupt or into debt because of an injury or illness, and that's not acceptable. Especially in the wealthiest nation anywhere in the world, we can afford to pay for it. I mean, we pay $4.9 trillion every year for our current healthcare system. If we went to a Medicare for all system, it would cost us $3.5 trillion. And that is a $1.4 trillion savings. So not necessarily a small chunk of change there. But this is why we need to be highlighting the need for Medicare for all, because we have such an important need for this. Because we are putting profits over people right now. And that's not acceptable. We need to be thinking about the longevity of every single person in this country. We need to make sure that every single person has access to health care. And I agree with Sarah, the fact of the matter is that the ACA was a Band-Aid. And it's very disappointing that our senators turned our back on the American people to reopen the government on a handshake deal that was then not followed through on, because those ACA subsidies haven't come back. And that's very disappointing for not just myself, but friends of mine. People that I know are literally scared that they will pass away and are currently in the process of moving to other countries, Canada, Brazil, in order to get the health care that they need. That's not right. And we need to make sure that every person gets coverage. Thank you.
The first piece of legislation that I will introduce is Medicare for all who want it. This is why. You cannot go an hour campaigning in this district without hearing about a crisis after crisis after crisis. From the woman in a bar in Manchester who grasped my arm trembling, small business owner saying, the ACA tax credits, my premiums are going to double. I don't know how I'm going to afford it. Please tell me you'll never abandon the ACA. To the 65-year-old woman recently in Laconia who, in a gathering not dissimilar to this, broke down crying in the middle of a Q&A saying, we've done everything right, we've worked good jobs, and we're worried about going bankrupt. To the man who came to watch us all last night, 4 hours after his wife was diagnosed with cancer, and she insisted he go to the forum to hear us. because they were worried about her MRI screening and some people weren't going to cover. Folks, like, this is insane. This is the richest country in the history of the world, and people can't afford healthcare. It is the largest crisis facing our district. It shouldn't be this hard, and that's why the first piece of legislation I'm going to introduce is Medicare for All to Want. But here's why I'm optimistic. Because the people I talk to, this isn't a Democratic problem. It's an everybody problem. It's a small business problem. It's a working families problem. And that's why I'm optimistic we can reach across the aisle and work with Republicans to get this passed. It's affecting all of our constituents. It's the number one issue I believe impacting our district, and it's the first thing I'm going to be focused on.
We're going to be turning to Carliegh on this next question. Pass that down. And it's a late addition to the list, but it's maybe the biggest issue that I'm not hearing a lot in other federal, congressional, Senate races around the country. It's AI. Last week, Oracle laid off 30,000 workers, about 18% of its global workforce. Simultaneously, they're investing $50 billion in AI infrastructure, including data centers, this year alone. Last year was the first year in America where there was more construction spending on data centers than office space. And that is going like that. This is an enormous issue, not getting talked about a whole lot. What's happening now? Talk a little bit about AI, what you're hearing about it on the trail, and what you think you could do as a member of Congress to try to get ahead with what is clearly galloping ahead of us right now.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of like the most important part of this, right? The fact that our technology is outpacing our ability to regulate it. And we've seen this in the fact that we're using AI to conduct this war in Iran. We saw the fact that AI was used in the operation in Venezuela. We need to regulate the use of AI, and we need to ensure that lobbyists and corporations that are going to prevent us from doing so do not have a seat at the table, that their voices do not outweigh ours on this issue. I mean, we hear it in New Hampshire all the time on the campaign trail in terms of like, is this going to affect the workforce? Are there people who are not going to be able to get jobs? AI is replacing them. And is this going to make my electricity bills go up because we're going to build these data centers and they're going to suck up all of our water and our electricity, and that cost is going to be passed on to us. These are two things that our federal government should absolutely be out in front of right now. But when it comes to AI and technology, not just are we seeing like these big corporations laying off and doing these crazy stock buybacks, right? Meta, Facebook, laid off 30% of its employees in the last few months. All of these tech companies are hemorrhaging employees right now, and they are concerned, right, that their influence in our political system is not going to be the same as it has been up to this point, because there are people like me running for Congress who are going to hold big tech accountable. What I want to say, though, to conclude this question, is that anything that we talk about when it comes to the future of our workforce, we need to make sure that workers have a seat at that table, right? And I say this as someone who took 6 years to unionize a workplace. There is no technology that is going to outpace us, and the only way that we have workers' rights in this country is to have workers as part of that conversation. Thank you. So just like our funding overseas, just like starting wars, everything needs to have guardrails and permissions. And this is an incredibly important one. We just saw a court case over in the UK that showed how detrimental social media is to children. I have a 14-year-old, an 8 3/4, she reminds me, and a 6-year-old. This is incredibly important to me and the future of our country in terms of our workforce, and to tie it back to what we discussed earlier, environmental factors. So this topic goes across medicine, it goes across law, it goes across our environment, it goes into our families, it goes into the First Lady of our country bringing a teacher robot into the White House. I'm a teacher. That was incredibly alarming to me, because I know how nuanced working with kids is. So we need to immediately put guardrails in place to oversee what is happening in terms of tech development. And they have been running rampant and now have played a significant role in the current administration. That's not okay with me, and I look forward to holding them accountable for what has already happened. Thank you.
Thank you. When we're looking at the local impact of these AI data centers, we are seeing increased increase energy costs time and time again. We need to put serious guardrails on how these data centers can be built and where they can be proposed. Because here in New Hampshire, we don't necessarily have the best opportunity here, I think, for AI, because we don't necessarily have the cheapest energy anywhere in the country. And that's only going to increase as we pull more AI data centers into our city. We also need to make sure that we think about the actual workers who are going to be affected by this. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the IBEW 104, and I'm proud to be the first union endorsed candidate in this field. But the thing is that we're never going to have AI replace an electrical socket. We're never going to have AI replace a pipe. That's not going to happen anytime soon. What it is going to do, it's going to be able to code for somebody, a software engineer. But that's where we need to make sure that we are putting our resources in education to make sure that the next generation of leaders and students are learning about trades and making sure that they have available options to go into, so that they're not necessarily just looking at one option or another, but making sure that we have plenty of different choices for them to make. Thank you.
When I think about the future and what's at stake for not only my 3 kids, but all of our kids, this is one of the topics that keeps me up at night. I agree with Carliegh. I think this is one of the most relevant things that we absolutely need to be talking about. Let's be clear. AI is going to create a lot of value. It's going to do great things for things like cancer research and neuroscience. But it's also, and studies at Dartmouth show this, it could destroy up to 20% of jobs. It's 20% of our workforce. And the really kind of scary thing is that when you talk to business leaders, the pace of change already, even in the last 2 to 3 months, is so much more rapid than people even predicted in the first place. It's the next coming of the technological revolution in terms of the impact that it can have. So what does that mean? We need smart, serious thinkers in Washington who are going to wrestle with these problems and figure out what this means across national security and our economy and medicine and research and investment, because there's so much at stake across the board. What we absolutely have to be certain of is that we judicially regulate this and that we are being maniacally focused on what this means for workers. It's going to change what our economy looks like. You've got to look at things like mid-career certifications, like retraining programs, more career colleges and apprenticeship programs, not just for youth, but for folks to be retrained, because our workforce is going to look very different, and we've got to get ahead of what that looks like.
The Industrial Revolution took decades. The Internet Revolution took decades too. The AI revolution is measured in years, months, even weeks sometimes. Profound changes are afoot, and no one can deny that. We need a Washington that actually has a vision, thoughtfulness to regulate AI, not to make it better for the corporate PACs that are giving money to folks, but to protect the constituents, the regular folks that are trying to make ends meet day to day and are plainly worried, and rightfully so. Basic regulation we should have with AI. AI should not be making healthcare decisions of what gets covered and what doesn't, and how much you pay for your medicine and your healthcare options. AI should not be used to charge one person one amount for a good and someone else another amount for good, because it has so much information about you, it knows exactly what you're willing to pay. AI should not be making life or death decisions in our battlefields. But part of this story too, we have to ensure that the gains from AI are equitably distributed. And I come back to this: tax the billionaire class. That is how we make sure that everyone in this country gets a fair shake, give pathways for people to retrain, to go to trade schools, to actually pursue the American dream.
I'm going to go back to Sarah on this one. And we're going to talk about presidential powers, executive orders, the checks and balances that we were taught that seem a little less used these days. What do we do? And frankly, it's gotten worse and worse in the Trump administration. Both parties have been guilty of this over the last several decades. So Congress needs to step in and re-grab some of that, that balance of powers. What can be done to rein in this grab, this presidential level grab of executive power?
So when I was asked to consider running for Congress, it was a conversation about what this administration was doing, and I was speaking with somebody in the intelligence community and said, I need it straight. Where are we at? And they said, everything that we thought this administration was going to do in 6 to 8 months, cut it in half. 3 to 4 months. Not stopping at anything. I said, okay, where am I best served? What can I do? They said, get your butt into Congress. Because Congress needs to stand up and do their job. They are our line of defense between us and the administration. I am incredibly proud to have former Representative Adam Kinzinger's endorsement, because Adam knows that I'm a principled person, that I will put people over party, over politics, over profit, to do the right thing. And I have been a candidate who has built cross-party lines already. I've worked with nearly every member of Congress on the House and the Senate side. And I'm ready to build that coalition to hold our administration accountable, to hold the individuals accountable under the court of law for what they have done that has been fundamentally against our Constitution and overreach of executive power. Thank you.
We need to impeach Trump and all of his cabinet members. I'm very proud that I have the endorsement of citizens impeachment, because I have promised that I will submit articles of impeachment against President Trump and several of his cronies. We need to be throwing sand in the gears anywhere we can. We need to be making sure that Republicans can't do a single thing. See, in Concord, I actually had a number of my Republican colleagues the other day quite furious at me because I was attempting to filibuster on a bill that would have actually banned vaccine advertising for local communities like here in Barrington. And I attached 20 amendments to this bill, and rather than debate them, I had a number of Republicans on Twitter say, we don't negotiate with terrorists. And the funny thing is that they end up shooting down their own bill, which I find very pleasing, because at the end of the day, we need to be thinking about how we can actually kill any of these pieces of legislation that they're bringing. We need to make sure that we can stop any piece of Trump's agenda, and that means throwing out whatever we can. It doesn't matter whether it's amendments, it doesn't matter whether we're pulling procedural motions, whether we're doing something just mundane to stop the actual regime that is happening in Washington. So we need to impeach him, we need to impeach his cronies, and I appreciate you all. Thank you.
The first thing that Congress needs to do is show up and do its job. Okay? I mean, we're on Portsmouth last night at a forum. We're looking at the clock, and we're like, in an hour and 24 minutes, the President of the United States is threatening to annihilate an entire civilization, and Congress isn't even in session. Not kidding. Literally not in session. Like they're on vacation. So the Speaker, who has absolutely no backbone whatsoever, needs to call Congress into session. And if I were a member right now, I'd be in Washington. I'd be protesting outside the Speaker's door if I had to, and putting it on social media and calling CNN if he won't bring Congress into session. It's ridiculous. I took a solemn oath 26 years ago now to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Members of Congress take a very similar and solemn oath to the Constitution, not to a president and not to a political party. Republicans in Congress, for the most part, have abdicated that oath because they are not doing their job via Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, which is oversight. and holding the administration accountable. Let's remember, folks, it wasn't the Democrats that told Nixon he was done, it was the Republicans. So Congress needs to do its job, but if Republicans aren't going to do it, we got to win. We got to win the majority. And the majority of the House of Representatives goes through this seat. We got to win. Thank you.
Congress has failed you. And it's been failing you for a long time. You want to know how much it's failed you? The 2001 authorization for the use of military force is still the basis that we use to engage in hostilities in the Middle East. Congress has been too feckless to actually do something about it. We need a Congress with backbone. We need a Congress that stands up to the president. We need a Congress that uses its leverage, the power of the purse, and hauls members of this administration that are engaged in systematic violations of the law and the Constitution before them, exposes them, and you know what? I fully agree with a few of the people here. Impeach President Trump. The evidence is clear. It couldn't be any clearer. Open up Truth Social. Okay? But it's actually what we need at the end of the day is a Congress that is truly going to assert itself. That is not just going to say, well, it's the Democrats that are holding the White House now, and it's the Republicans that are holding the White House. We're just going to do what party tells us to do. And what that requires is sending people to Washington with courage to do the right thing, even in the face of their own party, because we need folks that fight for you, not for party, and not for the people that run the party.
I'm just grateful to be running with such an incredible group of people who agree that Congress has two jobs, oversight and legislation, and right now Congress is failing at both of those, right? And when Congress fails to do its job, that hurts all of us. So one of the things, I saw that there was some hesitation in the room when a couple of the people up here were mentioning impeachment. I know that some people think it's divisive or it's, expensive or prevents them from getting other things done, and I just really do want to reiterate that those are two of Congress's core functions, oversight and legislation. And a great example is if we go back to Watergate and you think about what was happening during the impeachment of Nixon, that was when we got so much amazing legislation passed. It actually created a sense of urgency in Congress. And that's what we saw the War Powers Resolution. It's where we got the Endangered Species Act. It's where we got ERISA and our FEC rules. It's an incredible time. And so I think to anybody who says impeachment is not your job, it is not about Donald Trump, it is about us. It is about a constitutional order and a system of laws that we all live by. I took that oath when I ran for select board and I won my seat, and it is the oath that I uphold today, right? There is a reason that I'm running for Congress and that I believe that democracy is not just this thing that happens out there, it is something that happens with all of us. It is the way that we treat each other with dignity and respect, even when we don't agree on what's going on. And it is why I'm so excited that the divides in this country are not between Democrats and Republicans. They are between people and a system that does not serve us. This is something that we can overcome together.
A few more questions before closing remarks. Heath, I've got a bunch of audience questions, a lot of them back to foreign policy, a lot of top of mind, as you might imagine. I'm trying to summarize it like this. Trump administration foreign policy thrives on instability, unpredictability, much more go it alone. We're seeing that right now after years post-World War II of generally a very different way of American leadership in foreign policy. Do we need to, in getting away from the Trump approach going forward, do we need to look at the way that we've done coalitions over the last 80 years since World War II and revise them, modernize them for new coalitions, new ways of bringing people together, or something very much like what we've been doing since the mid-1940s? Is that basically what we should go back to doing? What do you see as foreign policy and building coalitions going forward post-Trump?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that when we're looking at the coalitions that exist currently, that the United States has built. I think that they're very strong allyships, when we're looking at things like NATO and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We have so many different allies that do rely on us for more than just hostilities and aggression. But when we're looking at the Pentagon and the military budget that exists today, it's bloated. They haven't passed an audit in years. And we need to make sure that they actually are held to account, because if they are just being given a blank check, that's a huge problem. Because we've heard several generals say, if you cut $1 billion from the Pentagon budget, nothing would change. So we need to make sure that they are being fiscally responsible, that they are actually holding themselves to accountability, to make sure that we are not necessarily lighting money on fire for the sake of wars abroad. Because we need to make sure that that money is being spent on healthcare, on housing, on education, and making sure that we can improve the livability of our country. Because that is a far better use of those tax dollars than bombing a foreign country. Thank you.
Our credibility around the world right now is pretty much shot. I think to so many of us, that's so sad, right? I felt so much pride representing our country overseas in the Marines, and then representing our country for close to 6 years, some of it overseas in the Obama administration. We're so proud to be an American. I remember being in France, in the Netherlands, when I worked for President Obama, and a woman coming up to me and pointing to the American flag on my lapel and saying, "Liberator." She talked about how her parents used to talk about when the Germans came. The world sees us so much differently now, and it's going to take years to get the credibility back. There are critical alliances like NATO that we need to restore, but the nature of our global community is, and the nature of the threats that we face, 21st century warfare, asymmetric warfare, is constantly evolving. And so we need to be open to new alliances along with it. Here's what I would do on our behalf. First, I intend to serve on the Armed Services Committee in the Congress. Carol Shea Porter served on that committee. She got a lot of great work done from our district on that committee. I think it's critical right now, when we have this madman in the White House, to have strong, principled people with experience who are overseeing the Pentagon and who can stand up to Trump when he tries to go into these misadventures, unauthorized and illegal wars around the world. And second, the Pentagon needs an audit. Any business would have one. And that's one of the first things that we need to do, is take a look at why we are spending $1.1 trillion a year on defense. Thank you.
I think about those men and women on the shores of Iwo Jima, on D-Day in Europe, and what they did for this country, what they did for Europe too. And I think about what Donald Trump is doing to the United States right now, and to our credibility, and to the partners that have historically stood with us. And it's shameful. It is. It's much easier to break things than to build things. We need to actually reinvest in treating our allies with respect, and not be courting the Vladimir Putins of the world. We need to actually, and it's not just about the military. We need a State Department that's robust and is based in values. We need USAID back and actually spreading soft power and American ideals in a country that cares about people throughout the world living healthy lives with dignity, in a country that's known, we stand up to dictators. We don't facilitate them. That's the America that I believe in, and this is the thing. We've got a tough road ahead of us, but don't count us out. With the right leaders, with folks that constrain this president, and then we'll see what happens in 2028. I actually believe in this country. We can do a lot better. Don't ever count us out. We'll still be back. We just got to hold this guy accountable.
When it comes to foreign policy, I think a lot about the fact that after I graduated from college, I worked as a teacher in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. For those of you who don't know, the Marshall Islands is this amazing ocean country spread out across almost 1 million square miles of ocean in the Pacific, halfway between Hawaii and Australia. The highest point above sea level anywhere is like 10 feet. And everywhere you look, you can see the water. And it's also a place that was a US territory after World War II, and it's where we tested 67 nuclear weapons. And my experience teaching there and helping the United States to address that legacy is what drove me to go get a PhD in nuclear policy and history, and it's why I've been teaching and care so much about this subject. What's happening in Iran right now is making the world unsafe for so many reasons, and a really, really key one is because it's showing China that they have the ability to invade a country. We no longer have the moral authority that encouraged them not to invade Taiwan. Right? It's also encouraging other countries to develop their own nuclear arsenal if they believe that's the thing that's going to keep them safe from the United States. So in Congress, things that I will do, like Christian said, bring back funding for USAID, soft power and diplomacy are so important for the United States because we are all so connected. But I will also make sure that Donald Trump does not have sole unilateral authority over the launch of a nuclear weapon, and bring back the United States New START Treaty to make sure that we can encourage non-proliferation around the world. Those are the very least that we can do in this moment. So this is a battle that's close to my heart, and on this little napkin in front of me, I have written ICC, Ukraine, USAID, Axis of Evil, House Foreign Affairs Committee, and diplomatic relationships. So the International Criminal Court is something that I've worked with to document war crimes and atrocities on the ground in Ukraine, and it's something that the US should participate in and may actually hold one of our leaders accountable for his war crimes. Ukraine, we are not a secure nation. NATO is not a secure alliance if we don't win Ukraine. There was an exercise done in Estonia about a year ago that showed us that. Yes, I care about the people of Ukraine, and yes, it impacts our national security. USAID, I had a chat with Administrator Powers just about a year ago before she spoke at an event I was at. She said, Sarah, what do the people need to hear? And I said, they need truth and they need fire. And she got up on stage and said, everything is ruined. Decades of work has been thrown out. But we can rebuild. It will take us 7 years, but we can rebuild. Axis of Evil. Right now, we need to make alliances stronger, not weaker. We need to be building them up, not tearing them down. That's why I would like to be on the House Foreign Affairs Committee to continue those important relationships. I'm down in DC and back often these days. And one of the things that I do when I meet with ambassadors of foreign nations is I shake their hand and I say, thank you. Please don't give up on us.
All right, we have time for one more question. We'll let Maura Sullivan, and then just so you can get your head around it ahead. We'll get to closing statements after this round of questions in the reverse order. Yeah, Melissa? In the reverse order that we had. So Maura went first last time. We'll go last on the closing statement. So we'll start with Heath, go right, after Christian, and with Maura. Keep that all fair. So this question, we had a few audience questions about democracy. That's a pretty broad question to end on, so we'll try to refine it a little. As a member of Congress, at the federal level, what is the single most impactful change we could make to strengthen democracy in our country?
Congress needs to pass my anti-corruption platform that I just rolled out about 2 weeks ago. Right now, there is a system that works for Congress and the top 2% of our country, and then there's a system that works for everybody else. That is not democracy. That's not small d democratic. Here's what my anti-corruption platform entails. Ban corporate PAC money. I don't take any. I'll never take any because big corporations have way too much influence in politics. It's not bringing power to the people. Second, overturn Citizens United. Get dark money out of politics. So there's one person, one vote, one voice. Third, ban congressional stock trading. It's disgusting. I'll tell you, I was a senior Obama administration official. You get access to privileged information. I worked very closely with members of Congress. The point of public service is to serve. It's not to personally enrich yourself. So we got banned congressional stock trading so that people aren't getting richer by trading unprivileged information. These are some of the first things we got to do, and then the fourth thing to add to it is we got to stop gerrymandering. This is one of the only districts in the country, New Hampshire won, where on any given year, either party can win. That's not democratic. And unless and until we can end gerrymandering, we just got to run better candidates. But I would ask Congress to pass my anti-corruption platform, and that's one of the best things that we can do to preserve, protect, and defend our precious democracy. Thank you.
President Trump knows that if folks go out and vote, he's going to have a tough time ahead for him. So he's making it harder, making it harder for people to actually exercise the franchise. We need people in Congress that understand that understands that it is a sacred duty of this country to facilitate people in voting, whether it's in person or in the mail. And in Congress, I'll stand up to this administration's attempts to make it harder for all of you to hold the president accountable. But part of this is a story of money in politics, too. It's a story of PAC money that all of these congressional candidates and members of Congress line their pockets for their campaigns with. We gotta make that illegal, and you gotta hold yourself to the values. So I've never taken corporate PAC money, I never will. Part of the story, too, is about different issues PACs that actually stack the deck. I have never taken APAC money, and I certainly never will. And I have no problem in saying that. And we need to make sure that members of Congress can't trade stocks at all, or go into the betting markets to trade on futures, on life or death events that completely undermine how decisions are being made in Washington. But the biggest thing, too, I go back to that idea of the vote. It is going to suffer assaults again and again by this administration because they know if you get to exercise it, they're in for trouble. So we got to defend that. Incredibly important.
Like my fellow candidates up here, I also do not take any corporate PAC money. I will absolutely be pushing to ban congressional stock trading. I will absolutely be pushing to overturn Citizens United. I promise to you to only serve 3 terms. I think term limits is an incredibly important thing, and I'm incredibly grateful to have the term limits endorsement. I also think that, leading by example is really critical. So if there is a government shutdown, I don't think that our members of Congress should be accepting a paycheck while the workers. And again, democracy is one of these things that relies on all of us. So it's not just going to UNH and making sure that students have the opportunity to register, which I'm going to be working on this Sunday from 12 to 2 at the Freedom Cafe in Durham. It's also serving, like the woman I spoke to at the very beginning of this night, sorry, I'm calling you out now, who came and served as an election clerk or a ballot clerk at the previous election, right? All of us are needed in this moment. And so if you haven't been asked yet to run for state rep, it requires 6 or 7 asks, and this is one of them. So please consider running for state rep in the state of New Hampshire. We have a state house that we need to win back. We have an executive council we need to win back. We have a governorship we need to win back, and we have a Congress seat and a Senate seat in this state that we need to win. And one of the things that is so exciting about this moment is what Maura said. This is a competitive district. This is an opportunity for the people in this room and rooms like this to decide who we want to represent us down in Washington. And that is incredibly precious. So for me, this comes down to being a representative as a role of service, not a career path, not a place to line your own pockets and develop insider information to protect and pad your future. So there's a blessing in going towards the end of the line in comments that I agree with every single person who has come before me. I think we're all very much in alignment with this. One of the things that I think is incredibly important is term limits, no paychecks when there's a shutdown happen, voter protection, money out of politics. It needs to be about you. Because guess what? Here in New Hampshire, people still matter. Your vote still matters, and that's what I'm going for. The most important thing to me is that we've seen a huge loss of faith in our government. The last election, as Heath likes to say, we lost to the couch. We need a candidate who people feel is accessible, who understands what everyday life is like, and has the experience to actually get it done and deliver. And that is exactly why I'm running. To offer myself as an option to you, as who I am and what I've done, to show up in this moment as my way of being in service to you and our country. And I want to give a shout out to Liz Bay, who's running for Executive Council. Thank you, Liz, for being here.
So I agree. We need to ban corporate PAC funds. We need to overturn Citizens United. We need to make sure that we are not necessarily seeing political influence coming from money. We need voters to be the ones who are centering. And I think that we need to be talking about two real proposals that nobody else has mentioned. We need to uncap the House from 435 members. When Congress was first implemented, there was a statement that they wanted around 30,000 residents or citizens per representative. Obviously, we would have around like 6,500 reps if that was the case today, so a little bit too much there, but we need to make sure that our representatives are more accessible. And this is an easy way that we can do it. The other thing that we have to do is we actually have to elect our representatives through proportional electorates. So instead of gerrymandering our districts like we've seen Republicans in the state legislature do, we would elect our representatives statewide and provide a certain apportionment of those districts to the representatives. I think that that's a very easy way that we can help solve a lot of the gerrymandering that we've seen around this country to make sure that we can make our representatives more accessible so that we have a better and stronger democracy. Thank you.
That brings us to the closing statements. 60 seconds each. We'll be going in reverse order, starting with Heath and working rightward. Heath, your 60 seconds begin.
Thank you. You know, it's been, as I said, a real pleasure and honor to serve as your state representative. But I don't come from a wealthy family. I don't come from a well-connected family. I never served as a lobbyist for like Airbnb or something. You know, I've been in the state legislature serving. And as a hometown kid who got my entire education right here in the Granite State, and a 7th-generation Granite Stater, I'm proud of what I've been able to do thus far. And I'm proud of the polling that we've had, because as one of two candidates in double digits, we've proven that we're building a coalition that isn't just Democrats. We're polling at 46% with independents and Republicans. We're polling at 40% with people who didn't vote in the previous election. And both of those are very significant because the next closest Democrat to me in that poll was at 12% for independents and Republicans. And the other 60% of those undecided voters who didn't vote in the previous election were completely undecided. So we need to pull these people into our coalition and help get Democrats elected up and down the ballot. Thank you.
So I'm going to start by saying thank you all for coming out tonight. Democracy is not a spectator sport, and you are all showing up for it. I am running for you. This isn't about me. This isn't about my name. This isn't about a career. This is about showing up and getting the work done. And I'm running because I have the connections and the relationships and the ability to do that. And because I know I could never look at my children in their eyes again if I didn't stand up and offer myself as an option to you in this moment to be of service and give everything I am and everything I have to our state and to our country. And I hope you'll hold all our feet to the fire and learn more about us. We have 5 months from today till the primary. 5 months, team. Please, learn more about us. Stay engaged. Tell your friends. Tell your neighbors. We need everybody to participate in the future of our state and our country. Sarah C. for 603. Thank you all. All right, show of hands, who here is a public school graduate or works in a public school? All right, who here comes from a union family? Woo! Yeah, you're welcome. If you didn't, you benefited too. Who here is someone who has shown up at polling places and held signs and written thousands of postcards or run for local office, is really freaked out about what's going on in our country, but really does believe that we can still make, look around, guys. Like, I see a room full of people who know exactly what is wrong with this country, who know exactly what the stakes are for this election, and know exactly how we can fix some of these problems. We cannot keep doing the same things and expecting different results. We need to do things differently. And this is where all of you come in, right? I have spent the last 10 months driving everywhere in this district. I've been in your driveway. I've been in so many of your living rooms and in coffee shops and in union halls and in libraries and in basements, asking people, what do you wish that Washington understood about your experiences, right? People want to be safe in their homes, in their communities. They want to afford to live here, and they want the tone of our politics turned down. If you want to get more involved, come find me or one of my 500 volunteers. 2 are in the back of the room, 2 are right here, and a couple other are scattered throughout. Thank you.
You know, at the start of this discussion, I talked about this feeling, a collective feeling in our gut that things are really, really wrong in this country. Part of that is definitely about Donald Trump. It is. It's deeper than that. You know, our leaders calculate, but they don't lead. It all feels really hollow to us. And all of us are just thinking, how the hell do we get out of this? So look, I'm not going to come here, I'm not going to make some sort of pitch and say, look, I'm the best because of this, because of that. Who all judge me? I'll tell you this though. I asked for one yardstick. For me, and for everyone else. What we need in this country, political courage. That's what we need. The rarest of qualities and the most important. And I know that if you use that yardstick, everything is going to be okay. And I am confident in every single one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your activism.
Thank you so much to the forum organizers, to Walter, to Steve. What a great event. Thank you to my fellow candidates for showing up tonight. I want to thank my husband, Mark, and my son, Benjamin, and my daughter, Olympia, who are here in the back. All of us up here are here for your future, your generation's future. That is what we are fighting for. And I want to thank all of you. Things are so tough right now. Like Iran last night, it's absolutely nuts that we're in the position we're in. But I'll tell you, I'm standing up here and I'm so hopeful. And that's because all of you showed up tonight. And there's a lot of other places we could be. And we have been through hard things before as a state, as a community, as a country. We went through the civil rights movement. We went through the March on Selma. But look what we've done. We're the country that elected Barack Obama. We sent Barack Obama to the White House twice. We did that. And we can do this. And so I thank all of you for being here, for showing up. I hope to earn your support. Learn more about us at maura4nh.com. And we look forward to continuing to see you on the campaign trail. Thank you.
All right. How about one unified big round of applause for this outstanding. We're looking to do a group photo, but not just group of 5, group of all of you. So just stand still for one moment.
Hold on.
We need social media to know how much Strafford County is ready to rock and roll in 2020. So on. All right, let me hand it over to Walter King, Chair of Strafford County.
Steve. Round of applause for Steve. I think he did a terrific job. Please don't leave. You can still have some comment because I know there is some questions you may have wanted to ask, and this is the opportunity for the candidates to come down for you to talk to them. While Steve sets up his live podcast for